Well, thank you very much, Chairman and committee members, for the opportunity to address AB 446 and the need to vote no on this passage. As I said, I'm Sandy Pasch. I'm a former state rep. I'm also a Jew. And during my testimony, I'm going to quote frequently from the principal author of the IHRA definition, Kenneth Stern, who is also a Jew. And he is strongly against using this definition and it being codified into law. And he has encouraged me to use his work in my testimony. I appreciate the recognition by the authors of this bill that there is anti-Semitism. However, I don't agree that this type of hatred should be singled out for special legislation. Hatred against targeted groups is rampant, and there are many groups that fear being harassed, attacked, arrested, deported, or fired. As a Jew and as a person who supports equality and free speech, it's my imperative to speak out on this bill and the weaponization of anti-Semitism and its being used to suppress free speech. According to Mr. Stern, I'm quoting, if the proponents of the IHRA definition were completely honest, they would tell you that the debate about the definition is really about how to treat pro-Palestinian speech, not anti-Semitism writ large. The history of the abuse of the IHRA definition demonstrates the desire is largely political. It is not so much a desire to identify anti-Semitism, but rather to label certain speech about Israel as anti-Semitic. And this harms our ability to identify actual anti-Semitism. End quote. This bill conflates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. As a Jew who has been openly critical of the state of Israel and supportive of Palestinian rights, I would be considered anti-Semitic, according to AB 446. Yet it was only last week when we learned of the rampant hate speech being used by young Republicans. Their vile text exchanges exposed anti-Semitism, racism, misogyny, and calls to violent action. And then Vice President Vance called criticism of this pearl clutching. A few years ago, we heard the white supremacist chants in Charlottesville of Jews will not replace us, and President Trump's defense of them as good people. And we just learned about President Trump's nominee to lead the Office of Special Counsel, Paul Iglesia, who has since withdrawn, but texts from him include the proclamation, "I do have a Nazi streak," and numerous other disgusting racist comments. So excuse my skepticism on the sincerity of the introduction of this bill to actually deal with true anti-Semitism. Moreover, the claims that this bill will not suppress free speech are just false. It has been used to do just that. The ACLU of Wisconsin has pointed out the bill's language, which clearly infringes on free speech. We talked about the court in Texas finding the use of the IHRA definition on college campuses is viewpoint discrimination. The IHRA definition has been used to eliminate university courses, discussions, and debate. And even Republican Senator Rand Paul identified free speech infringements when the IHRA bill was first heard in the Senate. I would again like to quote Mr. Stern. Quote, "Aren't we as a country strong enough to hear people advocate things with which we strongly disagree, and even find deeply hateful or offensive? Isn't it countries like Russia and Iran and China we point to, rather than America? Or just expressing an opinion can get you into trouble with the law, chilling others from expressing that same opinion." Mr. Stern also writes, quote, "My greatest worry is that we're seeing a confluence of four things. One, a desire to silence political speech because of the discomfort of many pro-Israel Jewish students. Two, the gutting of the Department of Education and the Office of Civil Rights when complaints about anti-Semitism are pending. Three, a failure to consider that it isn't only pro-Israel Jewish students who are having difficulty on campus. It is anti-Zionist Jewish students, Muslim students, Arab and Palestinian students, immigrant students, and so many more. And four, most significantly, I, quoting Ken, worry about the failure of due process and threats against universities, including stripping funding and demanding that departments are put in receivership. We are not going to improve the campus for Jews or anyone else by bullying and threatening." End quote. If there was a genuine intent to deal with anti-Semitism, there must also be a recognition of all the other forms of hate speech and actions rampant today. Indeed, the Jewish Leaders for Democracy, a group whose members include rabbis and former chairs and presidents from Jewish federations around the country, have issued a call to resist the exploitation of Jewish fears and to join others in fighting to preserve the guardrails of democracy. As a Jew, I embrace the pursuit of just society, one of the most fundamental concepts of Judaism. To effectively address anti-Semitism, we must also address all forms of racism, Islamophobia, immigrant hate, and all the other forms of hatred and intolerance rampant in our country today. And isn't that something we can all get behind? I urge you to vote no on this divisive, suppressive bill and support an action, a task force, that could meaningfully act to improve the safety of all targeted groups, including Jews. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sandy. Any questions for Sandy? Representative Kirsch.
Former representative, thank you for your service, by the way.
Hi, Representative. Nice to see you.
So your position is you don't have any preference to like the Jerusalem definition or the nexus? Your position is a task force? You don't, okay.
Correct. And again, Mr. Stern, who is an expert on this, I mean, he's one of the main authors of this, has criticized all the definitions as being flawed, and that should not be codified into law. Again, it's pointing out this exceptionalism, and when, as Hannah Rosenthal pointed out, when you start doing something for just one group, it doesn't make that group safer. In fact, it can make them more targeted. And I think we all know that. I mean, I've been around many, many decades, and I don't recall a time when people have been more afraid of their safety. Jews, Palestinian students, trans people, immigrants, brown people, people are afraid. And I think if we really want to address all this, we need to come together and do something bigger and broader and more in depth, and not just a bill that has been flawed and is flawed and will lead to increased litigation, I can assure you, because where it has been introduced, the number of lawsuits have gone up. A task force won't have that problem. It can be bipartisan and have representation from so many groups and do so much more.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Whitkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. So what I've heard so far is everybody's coming in and quoting the author for this definition that's in this bill. Can you explain to me, all of a sudden now the author doesn't want this used or codified anywhere. So could you explain to me, just to clarify for me, why did the author write this definition?
I think Representative, I think Hannah Rosenthal will have more the history of it, but there was a working group in the early 2000s to start thinking of how could we define it to help some European countries, and what are some suggestions to recognize it. He had never intended it for it to be used and codified and adopted in this way, and has been appalled and has been going around for quite some time saying, stop. He's testified in front of the Senate, and he would have liked to come and testify today, but is unable. So he is going around and saying, stop, this isn't what it was meant for.
I'm slightly confused because it's been around for a long time, and then all of a sudden, it's magnified at this time. One last question I have for you. So a lot of what I'm hearing today has to do with protecting free speech. Can you give me an example, and one for those two students that have been on campus? And I don't care if you want to substitute another group in there, but what crosses the line in your mind that should be dealt with that goes beyond what free speech is designed to protect?
I don't have an exact example for you, Representative, but I don't know if Ledge Council could answer it in regard to the existing hate speech laws that we have on the books. So, because we have some. So I don't know.
Well, let me frame.
I know from people who are non-Jews who have been severely harassed too. So I think there is a problem. Like, we are being horrendous to each other.
So I'll frame my question just a little bit different, Mr. Chair, if I can. So you heard the testimony from these two students. Did you hear anything in what they testified that you believe goes beyond the rights that are protected under free speech?
I think what they felt was offensive speech, and
So
let me finish, please.
Well,
I'm not
yes or
sure
no?
if I heard exactly everything they said. A lot of what they heard was criticism against Israel and being offended by the chant "from the river to the sea." Many people chant that. For Palestinians, it has a totally different message. And for people to be offended by free speech is, I think, part of what our country is.
So you believe that everything that they said would be protected under our free speech laws?
I would have to dissect it a little bit more. Again, I wasn't doing it that much, but much of what was said to them would be protected under free speech laws. To be able to say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free,
How about kill all Jews or that?
that does not sound good, and I wonder if that would be covered under existing hate laws. And so that's why I'm wondering why you need a special one.
Well, because I'm just going by your testimony, because when we get legislation in front of us, it's our job to listen to people that have a differing opinion. And so everyone comes up and says this violates free speech rights. I'm just asking a question. What crosses that line in your mind? And if you say, well, I'm not sure, I'll go along with that, and I'll just go on with others that testify. But I have a question for Ledge Counsel.
Go ahead.
I'm sure he'll love this. So a lot has been talked about hate crime enhancers, okay? Do we identify certain groups under our existing race, everything that's in the Constitution? So in our state laws, do we identify hate crime enhancers against certain groups that might be identified as being protected, that you can't discriminate against?
What's referred to as the hate crime enhancer statute in Wisconsin increases the penalty for a person who commits any of a long list of crimes against persons or property, and if they do so on the basis of intentionally selecting the person against whom the crime is committed or the property, in whole or in part because of the actor's belief or perception regarding the race, religion, color, disability, sexual orientation, national origin, or ancestry of the victim, whether or not the actor's belief was correct.
So just so I understand the interpretation, so that does mean that people that are in the Jewish community, if there's a crime committed against them, the hate crime enhancer could be applied. Is that correct?
If the allegation was that there was an intentional selection of the victim on the basis of any of those protected classes,
Okay.
then it
Thank
would
you.
apply.
Any other questions for Sandy?
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead. Representative Sinicki.
Thank you. So when you say the phrase, I got a couple questions if I could, Mr. Chair. When you use the phrase "from the river to the sea," I always assumed what other people assumed it meant. But you said Palestinians believe it means something else. Can you
Means
just tell me?
freedom. It just means freedom.
Just means
That
freedom. Good.
they
Okay.
aren't in an occupied territory, that they're free to go to work and doctor appointments and
Right.
take care of their families and live their life. That's what it means to them.
Right.
And I think it has a history where one group used it, and then since then people are offended by it. And I just want to say I'm offended by so many things that people have said to me, that have said to my daughter, that have been said to my family. I still defend their right to say it as much as I'm offended by it.